Now, welcome to another edition of News from Naboo with Or's Lightning Takes. And I think this will be our last kind of Vanity Fair article edition.
Yes. This is the stuff I titled etc. because it's not about specific shows.
All right. So let's get right to the news.
The theme that binds all of the new shows together is devotion. What's unique about Star Wars is that it's basically one story, says Kennedy. George was always dealing with episodes. Ironically, he was serializing his storytelling. He was influenced by Flash Gordon and cliffhangers on Saturday as at the movie theaters. All of that informed what the DNA of Star Wars is, which is why I think it's just organic that we made a transition into television. Factor in the standalone movies Rogue One and Solo, and the Bay Area production company has been churning out a blockbuster a year at breakneck pace, considering that Lucas himself only released one Star Wars film every 3 years, with well over a decade between the trilogies. Kennedy wants to dispense with the annual deadline and reconsider everything. The most important lesson they'd learned was this: Star Wars required a greater degree of professional devotion from filmmakers. Anyone who comes into Star Wars universe needs to know that it's a 3, 4, 5-year commitment, she says. That's what it takes. You can't step in for a year, shoot something, then walk away. It requires that kind of nurturing. I knew that Jon Favreau was always deeply interested in Star Wars. He was the first person I went to, Kennedy says. He said, not only would I have an interest, I have an idea. Plus, he was willing to meet that new criteria of hers. What's unique about Jon is his commitment, Kennedy says. He has a sole focus pretty much on this and for the last several years.
And yeah, I do talk a little bit about some of this in a video on my channel, but I think that should be a given, right? That if you're going to come into a franchise like Star Wars, you should be expected to have a degree of devotion, right?
Absolutely. This isn't a one and done, I want this on my resume type franchise.
Yeah, well, I kind of think that's what people have been looking at Star Wars as. Like, I mean, we have, and I have my issues with Kennedy, and I think one of the biggest issues is she doesn't herself seem to have like a plan for Star Wars, like the in-universe idea. She may have like plans for, how to, I don't know the ins and outs and how the everyday things go on at Lucasfilm, or who's pulling what strings, or how much Disney influence. Obviously, I don't know any of that, but it seems to me Kennedy's biggest flaw is she doesn't really, I don't think she's an expert in Star Wars itself. And so she tends to hire these people who she hopes will come in and do something. Like, with Benioff and Weiss from Game of Thrones, she hires them. Kevin Feige, well, why don't you come over and make a Star Wars movie? We have all these announcements about these, what's hot now, if you will. The hot director or the hot writer right now come in and do a Star Wars film, and then, either it never happens. A lot of the times it never happens, or, they just want to come in and do a one and done and, get in and get out, and they've made their movie and now it's on their resume and that's it.
Well, and there's a difference between making something like Rogue One or Solo. Those are standalone projects. That you're okay, I think, with bringing in one director, letting him work on it for a while, and then being done. But for when you're working on a trilogy, when you're working on that main Star Wars line, you can't show up, do a movie, and leave.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they thought they were going to. I mean, the root of the problem with the sequels, right, is they didn't have any sort of person with a grand vision for them. They brought, they bring JJ in, he just throws a bunch of questions out there in one movie, and Ryan's like, well, I'm not going to answer those questions, I'm going to do my own thing. And JJ comes back for the final movie, he's like, well, I'm going to go back and try to answer my questions and ignore the previous movie. And you end up with this kind of mess of a story. It's just you can definitely tell when you watch the 3 films that there's just no,
the connectivity is missing.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like consistent with each other.
No, even like character looks, like I've said before, in this is just for specifically Rey, but it applies to the other characters as well. You get the first movie, Rey has very innocent, like very light makeup. You can tell she looks like a scavenger, like more like. And then you move on to the next movie, and all of a sudden she's got dark makeup.
And her hair is darker. Everything was just darker.
Everything looks darker. The hairstyle, everything looks very different.
Yeah.
And you go back to the last part of our trilogy there, and we're back to the light makeup, back to that innocent look.
Yeah.
I don't know why Rian Johnson was like, you know what we need to do? We need to darken up all her makeup. It makes her look darker, severe.
Maybe they were just trying to go, I don't know, edgy look.
But that doesn't make sense. We're literally going from one day to the next, and now her whole look has changed.
Well, that might be one of the bigger problems. Is it is The Force Awakens happens, over the course of a couple of days, and then literally like the next day or that film, The Last Jedi picks up where The Force Awakens leaves off, and it feels like every character is different. I mean, you look at Poe in the first movie, he's just, it seems like he's this dedicated pilot, kind of fun-loving and happy, and then the next movie, he's the mutinous, the next day he's like, well, I might have blown up Starkiller Base yesterday, and
it's like all the characters needed a dark side.
Yeah, exactly, and I know you just sent me to, Jakku, because you're your most trusted pilot to get, the whereabouts to Luke, but now I'm the bad guy. It's like, what is going on here?
All right, well, let's move on with the article here. So after The Mandalorian debuted in late 2019, Lucasfilm's special effects division, Industrial Light and Magic, began to reveal details for the colossal curved LED wall that they call the volume, that can envelop a film crew as effectively as any location shoot, generating an environment that's convincingly photorealistic, even to a digital camera. There's no need to ship a crew and props and actors anywhere. Everywhere can be brought to the studio. With 3 volumes now in LA, 1 in London, and 1 in Vancouver, film and TV creators are just beginning to discover its capabilities. The glow of dusk or dawn can last a whole workday if necessary. You can freeze the sun. Or if you're shooting something on Tatooine, you can freeze 2 of them.
I mean, I absolutely think this technology is the future of filmmaking, television. It's the future entirely.
Right.
There's going to come a day when nobody is filming on, other
location,
than other than a few people who really want the gritty, realistic. They're just trying to sell something even more than this can. I think the day is coming when it's just all going to be done like this.
I think there are of course, from the filmmaking industry, it's probably all advantage. I mean, this works well for you're creating alien environments, trying to really showcase Tatooine, where you're never going to see 2 suns in the sky.
Yeah.
But I think back on Lord of the Rings. And the on-location shoots and the real epic space, and it feels a little cheaper if you're not actually there.
I do agree. Like I was saying before, I think not all movies, but most movies are going to go there. But if you really want to capture that, there's something. Lord of the Rings is a perfect example. Like when you watch that original Lord of the Rings trilogy, you feel like they're in Middle Earth.
Right.
Yes, there's CGI, of course there is, but there's something real about it that when you watch, say, the Hobbit trilogy, that doesn't feel the same.
I love that because the landscape in the movies was so majestic, they actually digitally had to take out some waterfalls and make it a little...
It's too majestic for us. But even with Star Wars, there's a different... when you watch, say, any of the original movies that went to Tatooine, went to the Tunisian desert, or I think they did a desert out in California, Death Valley, for Return of the Jedi with the pit, or the Sarlacc pit, it does look different than, say, seeing it in The Mandalorian or seeing it in the Book of Boba Fett. Tatooine doesn't... It looks really, really good, but there's a part of your brain that's that's not really there, is it? Whereas when you watch those old films, they're in a desert somewhere. Now, they're not on Tatooine, literally, but they are in a desert.
Well, and then you get to go and you can actually, plan trips to visit these iconic locations and be part...
the Shire is there in New Zealand. You can
go to the Redwood Forest. You can go to Endor.
Yeah, you can go to Endor, yes.
It's kind of an amazing experience to be able to be where those are. I mean, it's going to cheapen the filmmaking process, but is it to our benefit? Cheapening the filmmaking process doesn't make it cost any less to go see it in the movies.
No, and like I said, I do think it's the future because it's cheaper and you can do things you just practically could never ever do. I mean, like you said, you can't put a second sun in. Digitally you can, but you can never go to a desert with 2 suns in the sky and do that kind of filming. But I think everything comes back around, and I think we're going to go very digital with films in the near future, where everything's going to be digital, and then it's going to come back where people are like, well, now we're going to film on location because it's kind of more. It'll be this cool old school, it's authentic experience. So we're going to go and film. I mean, they even tried to say that with, The Force Awakens. I don't even know how many times J.J. Abrams was saying practical effects, even though there's still a ton of CGI in that film. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see it, this technology blossom and get perfected, and then people are going to want to go back to the old school way of doing things.
Let's move on to the last chunk of this here. Lucasfilm must give new generations their own collection of characters to love and hate, and not every classic character can be brought back endlessly. Kennedy is well aware of all this now. In The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, Mark Hamill, at 70 years old, delivered performances as 30-something Luke Skywalker. But younger actors played Luke's body, while advanced deepfake technology replaced the face. Bringing Luke to life is now a team sport, but that tech has its limitations. So does recasting. In 2018, the movie Solo explored Han Solo's younger years, with Alden Ehrenreich taking on the role of the smuggler originated by Harrison Ford. The film has its admirers, but it made the least at the box office than any other live-action Star Wars movie. Solo's swagger may be too singular for another actor to replace, is the message that they seem to have gotten. There should be moments along the way when you learn things, Kennedy says. Now, it does seem so abundantly clear that we can't do that. To endure, Star Wars will need new actors, new characters, in a new era, vaulting away from the timeline as we know it.
Well, I think she's right and she's wrong about Solo. I don't think you can ever... There's one Harrison Ford. And
right.
I think there are certain characters that just become Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. You're never going to recast Robert Downey. They're just, Jack Sparrow and, Johnny Depp. Just some characters are just so... I don't even know what the word I'm looking for, but they're just so nuanced, I guess, that there's no way another actor could ever come in. And they just get so known for that character, too, that you just can't pull it off. That said, I don't think, Ehrenreich did a terrible job in that film. I don't think the reason why Solo failed is because nobody accepted another Han Solo. I think it's because nobody wanted Han Solo's backstory. Yeah,
no one wanted Han Solo's backstory, and it was coming off of a movie that wasn't super well loved, and there was that huge movement at the time that's everyone's like, yeah, we're not seeing Solo, ban Solo, we're not seeing Solo, we're not giving him our money, we're going to show them who's boss. And
yeah, I mean, who knows how much, that impacted, who knows how much it was just nobody cared about Solo, who knows how much just the advertising in that film wasn't, up to normal Star Wars levels either, because they kind of figured going into it was going to flop a little bit, so...
Yeah, just like I thought the casting, and I can't remember the name, and you're going to remember it, casting of young Lando, I thought that he did a great job
Donald
with that,
Glover,
too.
he did a really good job,
I thought he was excellent.
And it's weird because he's getting a series, so...
Is he?
Exactly, I don't know what's going on with that now, because I think they talked to him... he was on one of the late shows not long ago and asked about it, and he kind of gave this really vague, I do what I want to do when I do it kind of answers, I think it was. It was kind of like, well, we'll see, and we'll see how it fits in my schedule kind of things, and I think that's just going to be one of those that just kind of goes by the wayside and doesn't get mentioned ever again. Mm-hmm. But I agree with her. You do need to move on to different characters and different times and places.
You can't crowd everything into 1 week.
No, yeah, that's another problem with Solo. Literally everything happened to him in 1 week. He gets the Falcon, he meets Chewie, he meets Lando, he does the Kessel Run. It's how many, he gets his DL-44 blaster, he shoots somebody first. It's like this, it's a check. The movie feels like a checklist of every major event in Han's life, and it just happens to happen in, a 1 week time period. But anyway, you do. I think the problem Lucasfilm is facing is they expected the sequel trilogy to just be this massive hit. All fans were going to love it, and they could focus on that time period. They were going to move on past. They were going to leave old Star Wars behind, but then the Star Wars they made didn't resonate with all fans, so they were kind of forced to go back to old Star Wars and dig into the original trilogy time period, the most beloved time period, you could argue, where every fan kind of most fans are, a fan of the original trilogy, go figure. And so they've kind of really focused on this, and now I think they're realizing, there's only so much we can milk here, right? There's only so much we can do with this time period and these characters before people are like, okay, that's great, but what about something else?
Absolutely. And they do need to branch either forwards or backwards and stop looking at the time period of the original trilogy.
Yes.
They don't even look at the time period of the prequels. They never touched that.
No. Well, a little bit, and they do give us, Bad Batch, and, you never have to go away from it entirely. You never have to abandon these characters entirely, but you do need to focus elsewhere.
Absolutely. She's right in that you do need to... She needs, at this point, they need to stand out on their own and not just use the original works of somebody else as a crutch.
Yes. Like I said, I fully believe they thought the sequel trilogy was going to be a hit, and they could... look at Galaxy's Edge. Look at the Star Cruiser. Everything they've built... started building a few years back is all based on the sequels, because they were like, well, of course people are going to love what we make, right? Of course we can use these characters and we can ride these ideas into the future. And, well, certainly some people do love the sequels and all the characters, but a lot of fans don't. And so now they're, like I said, they're kind of stuck trying to figure out, what do we do? What time period do we focus on? That's, I think part of the reason we got the High Republic era was maybe we can build our own kind of time period here. But anyway, I think that's all we've got for you this time. So take to the comments below and tell us what you think about any and all of the stories we talked about today, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.